What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this episode we're going to be installing some hood vents that I got for the hood of the Z31 Turbo, and after that we're going to go ahead and change the gapping of the spark plugs to see if we could take care of that misfire problem. So stay tuned. Alright guys, so on this episode the goal is hood vents. We're going to be installing these hood vents that I got from a Jeep, and I got them off of Amazon. These the Jeep community like to use to vent their hoods, and I started looking at the dimensions and it looks like it would work perfect for the Z31 Turbo. Now I'm going to place the back vents about this area right here and here, and this one right here I want to place it about where the back of the radiator is going to be, somewhere around there. And hopefully this will allow that hot air collecting underneath the hood to vent out and also cause a pull along to where that ducting that I did on the previous episode, it'll help aid in that cooling, getting the air to flow across the radiator. So that's going to be the goal of me installing these hood vents. So hopefully it pans out. But we also have a cutout on the engine. Whenever I started to accelerate on the last episode, it started cutting out, but I believe that's going to be spark plug gapping. So we're going to be pulling the spark plugs out, re-gapping them, and hopefully that's going to fix the ignition cutout. I believe it's ignition cutout. Hopefully it's not like a boost leak, but it feels more like an ignition cutout to me the more that I thought about it. So that's the goal of this episode. We're going to put the hood vents in and we're going to re-gap the plugs, and hopefully after that, that'll take care of that cutout that I was having, and also this will help aid in the cooling of the radiator, getting that air to pull across the custom ducting that I did to find its way across the radiator, because the radiator is vertical mounted and it's gonna need all the help it can get, honestly. So hopefully that will work out just fine. And cool thing too about having these vents towards the back where I have them at is on these engines here, the header and manifold rather goes from there, wraps around the back to the other side where the turbo's at, and that causes a lot of heat to collect in this back area. And having those vents in the back right here will help aid with that, allowing that hot air to have an exit, and that will also help with cooling. And one thing that I'm starting to question too, because this is a eBay radiator that I got off of Sirocco, and this is supposed to be a dual pass radiator, because if you see right here, you have your inlet and your outlet, or your outlet and your inlet rather, on the same side. And for that kind of setup, you need to have the radiator to have a dual pass to find its way across the whole radiator. There should be a divider plate somewhere around in here, and it should allow the incoming coolant to come around this way, back down and back through around that way in order to get back to the engine so that it flows across the whole radiator. Now, if your radiator is more like a common setup where you have, you know, your inlet right here, your outlet on the opposite side, that's going to be a single pass because the coolant has no choice but to go across the radiator. So I was questioning that, and I was wanting to find out whether or not that this has that divider plate, because you have to be careful with some of these cheaper eBay brands, because, you know, they cut corners, and if they didn't install that divider plate, then that could be causing a lot of my problems right there as far as getting the temperatures under control. So I'm gonna have to undo the radiator hoses and drain the radiator. And what I'm gonna do is take my little necklace I have right here, and I'm going to feed it through from the top and see if I could see it with a flashlight through the bottom. If I can't, then the divider plate's there. If I can, then I know this thing wasn't made right, and I'll have to take it out, take it over to my buddy's shop. We'll cut it up, put a divider plate in there, weld it all back together, and that would fix that issue if there ever is an issue with that. But, you know, one of those things, you know, when I start having problems with vehicles, I start researching things, and I start finding out things, and I learned something about radiators. So anyway, that's what we got on this episode. So let's go ahead, take this hood off, and get started. All right, so the key to the hood vents is functionality. You don't want it to just look good, you want it to actually function right. So I do have my strut towers around this area here on both sides. So lifting the hood up, I took my tape measure and made some measurements to make sure that I properly placed the back ones so that the area that is vented is nice and open and closer to the manifold itself so that it can extract as much heat as possible. That is the theory in it. And basically I just made my markings here and there to give me a general idea of where to place these at, and that's 12 inches down from this point here. 18 inches down from this point. From this point here to this point here is 18 inches. From the edge of the hood to this point there is 12 inches. I did the same on the other side, and that allows me to place them uniformly on each side, and also make sure that the vents are in the proper location so that it's in a nice open area so that the exhaust will vent properly out of the vents and pull as much heat that it collects in this back area out as possible. And I did make the marking right here, which is 16 inches back, and that's gonna sit right there like that. And once I have the hood off, I will make more measurements to make sure that this thing is squared up nice and even. But that's going to be the proper placement for these vents so that I can get as much heat extraction as possible out. And hopefully, you know, in the end, this will allow my air ducting to be more efficient. But hey, it's going to look cool though, right? We'll just have to see. So what we basically did is we threw some little spot welds around where I cut a lot of the webbing, just to reinforce it so that it's solid and not flapping under the hood. We hit it there, on the edges, around, just so that it's, you know, supporting the hood structurally since I cut it. And this is actually a pretty chopped up hood to begin with. That's why I had no worries about cutting into it in case I messed it up. But, you know, we thought we'd take the extra, you know, the extra effort and just make sure that this actually structurally supports the hood. So it's good to go. I'm gonna flip it back over, sand some more, and we're gonna repaint it. And then after that, we'll do the drills and mount the vents itself. So this hood was very jacked up, a lot of creases, a lot of dings from hail damage throughout the years of its life and whatnot, but I did go a little bit out of my way to fill in some of the profound dings and everything, and I did take some of the heavy creases out of the corners on the sides and body filled those in, but it still has creasing that I can't really get to because the webbing underneath is in the way. So this is as far as I'm going to take it, and it should look a lot better than what it did. So I'm gonna hit these bare spots with some edge primer before I throw down the primer on top of it, the automotive primer. And then after we have it like that, I'll do probably like a couple good heavy coats of primer, then sand down the primer, and then shoot the single stage satin black on it. And it should look a lot better than what it did before. I'm not looking for show quality, I'm just looking for it to be better than what it was. And then after this hood cures up, we'll mount the vents and get it back on the car. All right, guys, so the hood vents are installed, and I like the way it came out. It looks pretty good. The hood looks a lot better than what it did before. Definitely not perfect, because you can see the nice crease along the side right there. And like I said, I could not really get to that because of the webbing, and I was just looking for it to look better than what it did, and I think I accomplished that goal. And the hood vents really make this car look even more unique than what it did before, and that's what I like about my Z31. It's because I put a lot of custom fab work into this car to make it unique in its own, and you know, it's just every little bit more that I do to the car, it just adds to that. So I'm very happy with the results. Now, the true test is it going to be functional as it is nice? And hopefully these vents will allow that custom air ducting that I made to act a lot more efficiently, and we should be able to extract a lot more heat out of that engine bay with these vents. So hopefully it all works out well in the end, and you know, it wasn't just for aesthetics, and it actually performs a good function with that. So I'll pop the hood real quick and show you guys what it looks like underneath. So as you can tell, underneath, it does have a lot of venting now to get that heat out of the engine bay. And hopefully that, with it being positioned right there, it sits about right here. So with that custom air ducting, hopefully, you know, it provides a nice exit and helps aid that flow across the radiator. And hopefully these vents right there are adequate to extract a lot of that the heat coming from the manifold. So hopefully it all works out in the end. And unfortunately, I'm all out of time. It took me a long time to get these hood vents and the hood painted and prepped and everything. You know, a span of 2 weekends, and now that it's here, I don't have enough time to finish off the rest and go test drive it. So the next episode, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to go through this thing with a fine comb and make sure that we get this thing running right and able to take it on some rips. I do need to get me a temp tag for the back. I do have insurance on it now, but I need to go get that temp tag so I can actually take it on the interstate, take it around town, drive it, not have to worry about the cops, and really run it through its paces in order to see if everything I did works out good for us in the end. But I'm totally stoked with the outcome of it, and couldn't be happier. One thing I want to point out is whenever I made the cut for the front vent, I actually cut it back like from where the edge was, a 1/4 inch, and I didn't have enough space along this side, so I had to put this flat stock in there with some epoxy, and that allowed me to drill into that and rivet that down. But the back vents, I spaced it back about a 1/2 inch, and that was more than enough room to get these rivets in nice and neat. So learned my lesson on that. But all in all, I was able to figure out a solution, and it worked out great. So very happy with it indeed. So next episode, we're gonna run this car through its paces, test everything out, take care of the misfiring problem, and get it all nailed down. So more Z31 turbo content coming your way. But I'm all done. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'll definitely see you guys on the next episode.